been separated from the service, but he took all the tanks and everything that he had and loaded up on a train in Helmstedt. And I was in General Clay's headquarters one afternoon, and we see the teletype coming over in the room. I can see it very clearly now. And General Clay was ready to send the train through the blockade in Helmstedt and forcibly break the blockade and get to Berlin that way. But came across a teletype, General Clay, do not send the train from Helmstedt. President Truman will make a decision in 15 minutes. Signed Clark Clifford. And Clark Clifford at that time was evidently President Truman's aide or staff person. So in 15 minutes, it came across, General Clay, do not send the train. We're sending General LeMay to Wiesbaden and starting the airlift to Berlin. And we're going to supply Berlin by air this winter and not engage in any kind of hostility with the Soviet Union. So then the airlift started, and the French started an airlift, the British started an airlift, the Americans started an airlift. And so I was a part of military government, and so I was given the job during the airlift to try to figure out a way to bring in enough raw materials during the blockade to keep employment in West Berlin up, because most of the airlift brought coal and potatoes to eat and coal to heat the homes during the winter, because all the coal supplies and all the food supplies came from East Germany. So the blockade had cut off essentially all food and all coal and energy supplies. For some reason, the Soviets never cut off the electric power in West Berlin, and they never interfered with air traffic. So we kept the blockade going for about 10 months, and then finally the Soviets gave up and opened up the traffic, and the blockade was over. And that was in 1949, in the spring of 49. So I had a decision to make at that time where I was going to stay with the U.S. government and with in the State Department and so forth, was I going to come home. So I made the decision to come home, and then I went into business, and that's been my life ever since. So that's.
I would like to mention just a couple of other items of trivia that I've remarked earlier, that we had several things in common. And as you were talking, I thought about two other things that we had in common. And that is, when your division went overseas, you went overseas on a luxury liner, the Ile-de-France, and you went as a unit and you went unescorted. When my division went overseas, we also went on a luxury liner. We went on the Queen Mary, and we went unescorted. You went the southern route and ended up in southern France. We took the northern route and ended up in Scotland, and from there down to England, and eventually across the Channel onto the continent. The other thing we had in common is that both of us married girls over there. You had met your future wife during your first tour there, went back and married her. I met my wife while I was there. I stayed in Europe for about 3 years after the war, and came home with a French bride, as you came home with an Estonian bride. I think you might want to mention too, Cabell, some personalities. You mentioned your acquaintanceships with General Patton. Do you have any other particular friend in the 7th Division that
I had lots of friends in the 70th Division. The best friend that I had was a warrant officer in the signal company named Al Devoto. And we were very close friends, because he had the responsibility for connecting up the wires that we were able to establish out front to the headquarters. And he was from San Francisco, and we stayed in touch for years and years until he died about 10 years ago. And we were very good friends. Also had some other friends, Shanahan and so forth. And of course my best friend was my driver in my Jeep. Fortunately, he wasn't with me when the bomb hit. There was an infantry driver with me at the time, but my driver's name was Mulcahy, and we were very close friends. But I had a lot of friends in the Army, and unfortunately, just like you did, I had a lot of people that I knew and acquaintances that were killed. But I was very lucky because I wasn't ever seriously hurt. The biggest wound I ever had was I was being strafed in a renegade German airplane once, driving on this road during the combat close to Forbach, and I dived out of my Jeep into a ditch, and I used to smoke a pipe. I had a pipe in my shoulder up here, in my breast pocket up here, and it stuck in my ribs and hurt me very badly, so I pulled the pipe out and threw it away, and I haven't smoked ever since. But yes, we had some wonderful memories. Also, you were at my wedding, and I came and visited you before you were married and after you were married. So we had a lot of pleasant experiences together. So,
well, before we end this interview, I think you want to show to the camera some pictures. And
oh yeah, I do.
Something else that
I have a number of pictures.
We want to send as a part of this entire project back, to the Library of Congress.
I never had any pictures, never had a camera, never took any pictures during the war. But about 4 or 5 years ago, I received a telephone call from a man named Richard Satter, who lives in Bloomington, Indiana. And coincidentally, our daughter Caroline was married and living in Bloomington at the time while her husband was going to graduate school. He'd been in the Marines for 8 years. So Shirley and I visited, and Richard Satter was there. So I saw him, and if you can believe it, he had a camera during the war. So he took a picture of me during the war, and he also took some pictures of some of the things that we saw during the war and so forth, which were very interesting. He also had a copy of the Stars and Stripes, which was the Army newspaper, which was the only news that we have. Every now and then we could hear the radio, but in this particular issue of the Stars and Stripes showed exactly where our infantry division went into Germany. And it also had a picture of in the Stars and Stripes of after the war was over, how we honored our people who had been killed with the 70th Division honored the war with a military salute. So I'll send these pictures along with this interview. Well, thank you very much for doing this, and I hope you're able to get most of the veterans on tape for this project.
Well, just let me add a footnote also that I want to thank you for doing this. And I think the Library of Congress, at the risk of some modesty, the Library of Congress is going to be pretty lucky to have both your experiences there and mine.